Hi guys, so before we get into it, a couple of quick disclaimers. Firstly, there will be plenty of spoilers today. This is quite old at this point. And secondly, you'll find all my other reviews of Stephen King adaptations in my Stephen King playlist. So, The Stand. Absolutely one of my favourite stories of all time. I absolutely love this. It is, I believe, Stephen King's longest novel. It's an absolute doozy of a book. The page count is enormous. It's 1,325 pages long. It's long. Now, obviously, quantity doesn't always equate to quality. I know that, but in the case of The Stand, I would absolutely argue that it does. I first came across the novel in the middle of the 90s, so whenever I went to visit my mum during the holidays, whether it be half term or the summer holidays, she'd always leave a few King books lying around randomly, and I'd pick one up and just read one, and that's how I came across The Stand. And it would have been around about that time as well that I discovered the adaptation of The Stand, because I think my mum rented certainly the first half of it. So when it comes to this TV show, I don't know how many episodes it would have been when it originally aired on TV, but as something that you would eventually have to rent from Blockbuster, you'd have to rent 2 tapes. So the first tape would have the first 3 hours, and the second tape would have the second block of 3 hours, if you see what I mean. If you don't know what the story is for The Stand, by the way, it's basically about a disease that rips across America and then eventually the whole world. So the American military, in their wisdom, have come up with this new variant of the flu called Captain Trips. And this thing is absolutely lethal. And of course, it accidentally gets out of the scientific bunker in which it was created and starts spreading everywhere. It's something like 99.7% lethal, so chances are if a character catches this thing, they are dead. There is a small section of society which is immune to this disease, and we focus on a lot of these characters as they start to cope with the idea that everybody around them is dying, but they may end up surviving, and what are they going to do next? So the first half of The Stand is mostly just about the disease going all over America and killing people. And then the second half is when the people who are left suddenly start trying to create a new society from the rubble. And 2 distinct camps start forming, one in Colorado, which is generally the good camp full of good people, and the slightly naughtier, bad society that springs up in Las Vegas. Now, the second half of The Stand is a little bit more divisive than the first, because it goes a little bit supernatural in nature, mainly because the villain on the Vegas side of things is an evil entity who is definitely not human. But me personally, I just love the entire book. But we're here to talk about the TV adaptation, and I'm pleased to say that this is a mostly accurate recreation of what the novel is. The only trouble is, it's too short, even at 6 hours. I think this needed to be maybe 9 or 10 hours, because it just doesn't have anywhere near the same depth or nuance that the novel has. It often feels like we're skimping through the character arcs as fast as possible. And there were a few times when I was going through these 6 hours last week where I thought to myself, okay, even though I can acknowledge that this is a pretty decent adaptation, it's not something that I'm going to be going back to necessarily in the future, whereas with the novel, I always find myself picking it up every few years. There are a few things that haven't even made it from the novel to the TV show, mostly because of time, I guess. So there's no kid. I don't mean there's no children in this thing. So basically, there's a villain called the Kid in the book version, and he's just been completely removed for the TV version. And this annoyed me because the Kid is one of my favourite characters in The Stand, but no, completely gone. And there's also no Zoo. So there's a minor group of villains called the Zoo, I believe, in the book version, and they've just not made it to the TV adaptation at all. Now, in this case, I suspect it's because these villains are just way too evil for 90s television networks. So the people in this particular group of villains, they're rapists and hoodlums of the absolute worst variety. Absolutely fine for something like The Walking Dead in 2025, but 3 decades ago in the 90s, they tended to try and make TV shows a little bit more family friendly than they are now, if you see what I mean. But there are also things that haven't made it to the TV adaptation where I think that's a positive change. So, for example, the character of Rita, who Larry escorts through New York in the first half of the book, she's been removed entirely from the TV adaptation. But this is one of those instances where I think that's probably a good thing, because Larry meets several characters along his particular journey. And getting rid of Rita, I'm kind of the opinion that, yeah, maybe we could do without that particular subplot. It's fine in the book. I don't mind the character of Rita. But if you're going to remove her for this 6-hour version, then okay, I can get down with that one. The villains who have made it across to the TV show have been better cast than the protagonists, I would say, on the whole. The guy who plays Randall Flagg, aka the big bad of the whole thing, absolutely spot on casting, really good performance too. His number 2, Lloyd Henreid, he's played by a guy called Miguel Ferrer, an actor I've always enjoyed watching, whether it be RoboCop or Traffic or this. And then we come to Shawnee Smith, who pops up as Julie Lowry, a fairly minor villain. I didn't know that Shawnee Smith was in this until suddenly she was on the screen in front of me. She only would have been in her early 20s at the time that this was made. Obviously, she's mostly famous for playing Amanda in the Saw films, but I enjoyed her so much here that I found myself wishing that the part of Julie was bigger. I think this is the second time since I've been doing this Stephen King review series that we've randomly come across Shawnee Smith in a minor role. I think she's also in one of the Salem's Lot films, possibly. And then we come to the Rat Man, a fairly small villain in the novel. Now, this is actually something that's been improved for the TV version, because we get way more Rat Man here than we did in the novel, and I absolutely approve, because I think King definitely underused this character. The only thing I'll say about the TV version is that they don't give the Rat Man his sword and hat that he has right at the end of the book version, but that's only a very small thing. The only villain who hasn't been cast very well, I'd say, is the Trash Can Man, a brilliant character from the novel, but I always pictured him as a young guy of like 19, 20, just out of school. But here they've cast somebody he looks about 40 to me, and he's just way older than I would have pictured the character to look when I'm reading the book. And the weird thing is, the clothes that this 40-year-old actor's wearing for the part, they look like the sort of clothes that a younger person would wear as well. So because of this casting, I just found myself not really enjoying the Trash Can arc in the same way that I would normally enjoy it when I'm reading the book. Plus, it's the Trash Can Man who comes across the kid, and the kid's not in this adaptation as well. So the whole Trash Can Man arc, little bit of a write-off for me. Once we switch over to talking about the good characters, that's when we get to my biggest gripe about this adaptation as a whole, and that would be the casting of Franny Goldsmith, who is sort of like the beating heart of the novel. She's my favourite character. Is she the main character? I would say so. That might be a bit controversial given the fact that she doesn't go on the pilgrimage to Las Vegas in the second half. But if I had to name one character from The Stand, then I think straight away I would probably say Franny. But casting Molly Ringwald, a big mistake in my opinion. I'm not that familiar with this actress. I don't remember her from anything else. But within 2 scenes of seeing her trying to play Franny, I just thought to myself, yeah, this is not her at all. The last couple of times I've read The Stand, I've pictured Emily Van Camp playing Franny. Obviously, it wouldn't have been possible in 1994 to cast Van Camp, even if I'd been the casting director, but still, Molly Ringwald, it's not good, unfortunately. They've actually given Franny less scenes than some of the other main characters. I didn't count them or anything, but it just seemed to me that even the people behind this TV show realised that they didn't have a great Franny, maybe, so they've decided to give more scenes to Nick and Larry and Stu. They've managed to cast a couple of real heartthrobs in the roles of certainly Nick and Stu, and I can just picture the producers like behind the show thinking, oh yeah, the grannies who are going to watch this on ABC, whatever, they're going to love Rob Lowe without his shirt off. So let's have a lot of him, and we'll constantly have him on screen. Give him extra scenes. Give him all of his scenes from the book. You know, the guy who plays Stu is Rob Sinise, Gary Sinise, I beg your pardon. Sinise is the guy who went on to play that cop from CSI New York, and he's had a pretty decent career. Really good actor, and he is pretty good in this. The trouble is, he's got way too much charisma as an actor to play Stuart, who in the book is a little bit of a blank slate. He's a very stoic, quiet sort of guy. Out of the Franny-Stu relationship, Franny's the one with most of the personality, you would say. You know, Stuart's just that Mr. Dependable, stood in the background, and Gary Sinise has just got way too much personality to properly play Stu. But I do kind of like Gary Sinise in the main, so I didn't totally hate this portrayal, not in the same way that I disliked Molly Ringwald as Franny Goldsmith. That's just hideous to me. The casting of Glenn Bateman is not great either. Okay, they've put like a 70-year-old guy in there, which is sort of accurate to the book, but he just feels like a completely different guy from the book. The woman they've got to play Dana is pretty solid. The trouble is, she's not established enough in the story prior to her big scenes with Randall Flagg in the second half, although this is kind of similar to the book, I suppose. But it doesn't help that they've taken out the zoo section, which I believe is when Dana is supposed to be introduced, although I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me on it. And I've not much to say about the casting of Harold, who I guess you would probably call more of a villain than a good guy. But from looking up the actor on Google who plays Harold, I get the feeling that in real life, this guy's actually like what you would call a really good-looking, young, handsome actor. He's not actually a Harold type in real life at all. If I try and judge this thing purely as its own show and just leave the novel aside for one moment, well, that's actually very difficult for me to do because I've lived with the novel for 30 years at this point. It's almost impossible for me to watch the TV version of The Stand now and not be constantly comparing to the novel in my head. But if you're the sort of person who doesn't read, and you're the sort of person who isn't about to start reading by picking up a 1,300-page novel, and maybe you're wondering if you should give the TV version of The Stand a crack, I would say go for it, if only for the fact that this is free to watch on YouTube, and all 6 hours are on the one video, so it's not like you've got the faff of watching like several different videos on YouTube and you've got to hunt them all down and put them in the right order. You don't have to do any donkey work like that. The entire show is in the one YouTube video. It's a pretty good quality as well. I'd say it's VHS type standard, but a really good type of VHS quality. So give it a go. The production on this show is pretty solid all the way through. The locations they managed to scout seem pretty as they should be. You know, every time there are scenes that are meant to be taking place in Nebraska, for example, it looks like they're there. Same with the scenes in Colorado, same with Las Vegas to a point. Although, watching this, I did think to myself that it all feels a little bit paint by numbers in terms of the direction. It's like, once they got on the set, it was like, oh God, we've got like 6 hours to get down. Let's just, look, everybody just say the lines, I'll point and shoot, and then we'll move on to the next. It's a little bit like that, it seems to me. It does feel very sleepy sometimes. You won't find that much panache in terms of how this has all been put together, with the possible exception of a really good scene near the beginning where we get a slow camera shot that goes around the research centre. We see all these dead bodies. We've got like scientists leaning over consoles dead, and I think Don't Fear the Reaper is playing over the top of this as we slowly pan around, and that's a really cool moment actually to kick things off. But moments like that are kind of few and far between throughout the 6 hours. For the most part, it's just a case of let's get it done and move on, and we're not going to overthink it. But certainly I would give this a try. If you're the sort of person who has time in their schedule to watch TV shows, then why not try The Stand? Right, it's time to get to the bag of terror so I can show you what score I'm going to give this. So we got 1, 2, 3.5 Michael Myers carving knives out of 5. I do think this is really good, but I also think that there's the potential for a very wide-ranging set of opinions when it comes to The Stand. There will be some people who attempt to watch this and they'll find that it's just not for them. Maybe they will discover that combining this very real-world killer disease type threat with a supernatural walking dude with boot heels is not the best use of their time, maybe, whereas there's other people who might even give a bigger score than me, because this is a very popular story in King's canon. That loads of people out there who absolutely love The Stand, whether it's the book or the TV show. Me personally, I've reined myself in a little bit on the score, because I don't think I'll probably end up watching this show again going forwards. I do see The Stand in my future, but via the book, because I absolutely love the book. For me, that's a 5 out of 5. Absolutely. It's an absolute masterpiece, but I don't think I quite have the time in my future to also watch the Stand TV show. This adaptation is not good enough for me, but it was still fun to check it out again after all these years. And at some point in the next few weeks, I'm going to watch the other adaptation of The Stand, because they redid it in 2020, I think. I've still not checked that out, so it's going to be very interesting to see if that's an improvement or whether they went backwards with that one. So stay tuned for that. Although I'll probably do some different videos for a week or so, just to give myself a little break from the world of the walking dude and all those characters I've been talking about today. Right, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you for joining me for the review. Follow me on X if you'd like. My name on there is exactly the same as it is here, and I'll catch you all again next time. Bye-bye.